pleasure to have you. We're joined today on the Sunday Sit Down series. I'm Eddie Ramos by Nicco Montano, the inaugural UFC Flyweight champ. So we welcome you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Nicco, we want to share your story today, inside and outside of the octagon. You're more than a fighter, and we want to hear your story, and we look forward to sharing that. So Nicco, if you could start off by sharing kind of your upbringing. You good? As far as sharing your upbringing, where are you from? And talk to us about your childhood.
Yeah, so I'm from the Navajo Reservation in a small community called Ligachigai, and my grandparents own a trading post there, and they still use the bartering system. So I grew up in kind of a place where a handshake that, was meant to mean yes, actually meant yes. And so everybody just went by their word. And I went to college in Durango, and that's kind of where I started to fall in love with martial arts. Started doing jiu-jitsu for self, because I was the only girl out there. I was by myself going to college, and I didn't have any friends. I was making new friends. So in order to just feel safe, jiu-jitsu was the way to go. I had done boxing and kickboxing, done pad work in the past. Growing up, my dad was a boxer, so it was all familiar, but jiu-jitsu was kind of where I really started to fall in love with martial arts.
Wow. So growing up in New Mexico or Colorado?
I grew up in Arizona on the Navajo Reservation, and then went to college over in Fort Lewis in Colorado.
Okay. Very interesting. So going from one area to another, talk about that transition, excuse me.
The transition was kind of difficult at first, just because I was coming from such a small town. It was kind of hard to get in the mindset of how everything works. Like I said, I came from a place where my grandparents' trading post was what held the economy together, basically, in Ligachigai, Arizona. And I moved to Durango, which, the population grew probably twice that, 3 times that, even though it was such a small, tiny city as well. But Fort Lewis attracts so many people, so many diverse groups of indigenous peoples too. So that was exciting for me. And that's kind of what drew me to that place. So it wasn't totally unfamiliar, but it was definitely unfamiliar, different way of life for sure.
So your father, and that's interesting you say that. So it wasn't a crazy transition, but it was a difference in the amount of people. Obviously, it's like me going. I always relate back to my mother going from Puerto Rico to New York City. To me, that's mind-boggling.
Right, exactly.
So I can relate, not on my end, but my mother for sure. As far as your father, he was a amateur boxer, a pro boxer. As you got introduced to combat sports through boxing first, prior to the jiu-jitsu, or?
He was a pro boxer. He fought for. He was a Golden Glove fighter. So I grew up hitting pads with him. He and my mom weren't together, so we'd have separate visits. But whenever I'd go and visit him, he had a gym either in Farmington or Gallup, which was 2 hours away from Ligachigai, and those are the border cities. So a lot of people would go either to Gallup or Farmington from the res just to grab supplies from Walmart. That's the nearest Walmart. It's nearest Sam's Club. It's the nearest place to get anything. So I'd run in and hang out with him at his gym, and he'd make me hit pads. And at first I was like, why am I doing this? This is not going to benefit me in my life. But I was just a child, So yeah, he, that's all he knew. He was a boxer and owned gyms until he passed when I was 17. And then that's when I went to college. So it kind of just carried on through there.
Wow, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So the transition from that, you go to college, and that's when you took the boxing and you started learning jiu-jitsu prior to that a little bit. Talk to us about, was there an amateur circuit there? I talked to Angela in the past, not too much amateur for her. Obviously, she's a little older. So talk to us about that. A lot of people don't understand that in MMA, especially on the women's side, the amateur circuit is now existent, but it was basically non-existent for a long time.
Yeah, especially when Angela was doing it, because my dad was Angela's first coach. And so she has been boxing since she was 14. So she's seen most of it and still, kind of got the short end of the stick when it came to being an amateur and pro. But, and then I was like right at the beginning of where amateurs started to show up. But it was kind of hard for me to find any amateur fights. And that's exactly why I turned pro after only 5 amateur fights. Because I initially started doing jiu-jitsu tournaments and then started winning those tournaments and just wanted a little bit more of a challenge. And so the guys that I was training with and Angela were like, you should just fight. And I was like, I don't want to fight. Like, I like hitting pads, but I don't like getting hit in the face. Like, that's why you have jiu-jitsu. And just like, that's when Ronda Rousey was big and she just had her judo. And so she was a big inspiration, seeing Angela there, and she's just like, that's all she knows too. So she's like, just do it. You're strong enough. You're tough enough. So I did my first amateur fight and won in the first round. Second one, same thing. Third, fourth, fifth, same thing. And then it was just hard for me to find fights. So I had to either make the jump to pro or, keep scrounging for amateur fights.
So this was all the amateur circuit. Did you go around a couple different states, or was it mainly where you were based out of, and how did that work?
Yeah, so I was fighting for a lot for King of the Cage. And so right there, actually, on one of the reses near Durango, Colorado, called Toyac. In New Mexico, they have this little casino, and that's where they have a lot of King of the Cage fights, and that's where not all of my amateur fights, but a couple of them were. And then a couple were also in Denver. So between those two places, I had like teammates going down to Phoenix. So we were all around the regional area. But as far as me, it was Denver or Toyac. Ignacio too. Ignacio is another Ute res out by Durango, Colorado.
Wow, that's interesting. So as far as going from the amateur to pro, talk to us about that transition. Your first pro fight, how did you feel? Talk to us about that experience a little. I know we're going back a little bit. But.
My first pro fight, I was like, okay, I've fought at 135 before. I've always heard people in my ear be like, you should be a 125 or you should be a 125. But all my amateur fights are at 135 and finished in the first round. So, and I just got a belt in Denver. And so I was like, all right, I can do this. Like I can go pro. And so I went pro, and same thing. I won the first round. But this chick was a little tougher. I had a little bit more on my shoulders. I had just moved from Durango to New Mexico to Albuquerque to just kind of solidify my goal and make sure that that's the right career for me, and, make sure I'm all in so I can truly be like, I tried and it didn't work out, or I tried and this is what happened. So I moved to New Mexico, did my first pro fight. Girl was a lot stronger than a lot of my other 135 fights. But again, it could have just been the weight on my shoulders. And like I said, won the first round again. So I thought it was just, at this point, it's not a fluke, right? At this point, it's like, okay, I can do it. I'm ready to go. Give me my next fight. And then my next fight, I got beat up.
Sometimes that jump, you get the confidence in the next fight. It's a whole different animal. Talk to us about your as you transitioned to New Mexico, the coaches, the gym you were out of. How did you come about making that move? I guess I know you jumped ahead a little bit there.
Yeah, the coaches in Albuquerque were from Fit and HB, and they were the ones putting on the King of the Cage fights. So I was already familiar with them through a couple of my amateur fights. Got to know them, Tom Vaughn, Arlene Sanchez, and John Judy. And so together they just seemed like a perfect team, So I went over to their gym, tried it out a couple of times before I decided to make the move. And it just seemed like it worked. There were some people there who I could work with, and some actual girls my size. One girl my size, Brenny Gonzalez, she fought a bunch for King of the Cage too, but it was just the point where, in Durango, Angela was in Thailand, so I didn't have any girls, and I was just getting pieced up by some guys, and they're like, you got to be tough. You got to do it. And I was like, I don't even get punched in any of my fights. Quit punching me. So that's how I got to know the team over at Forbidden HB, though, was just, finding that special home in Albuquerque in New Mexico, being mecca for MMA. So I was already familiarized with a bunch of people, the coaches and a couple of teammates, and it just made the transition smoother.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds like you had a base there. You're able to grow with people early on in your career. That's essential for success. You see a lot of times people hopping around or not having that relationship with the people in their corner. We continue to see it, especially in MMA. Boxing, you see it as well. That's great, though. So as far as you get into your pro career, you had a tough second fight. What year did you turn pro, as we share with everyone watching today? And then the jump between turning pro, you hear this a lot of times, turning pro and then finding yourself on the Ultimate Fighter. I mean, there's a jump there, and people don't always grasp that. We have fighters, especially on Team La Perla, that have fought on TV in the first 3 or 4 fights. People don't understand that.
I can't pinpoint the actual year that I went pro right now. I've been fighting for about 10 years, if that'll give you an idea. But yeah, turning pro, it was fun that first fight. And that second fight, I fought Pam Sorensen at 135. She was the Invicta champ for a bit. And she's at 145 now. I'm not sure if she's still at 35. She was calling out Cyborg. So it was like from amateurs to pro.
Quickly.
And and I lost a split decision in that fight. So I knew I was going to hang in there with the, at the time, Pam didn't know me. I didn't know, we didn't have a name. But we knew after that fight that we were one of the strongest girls that we've ever, come in contact with, and you gain that respect. So that's when I had my mind kind of altered in terms of the respect aspect and discipline and how hard I want to go and how much I want this. So as soon as that fight was over, I had my next fight was at 125 with Shannon Dobson, who was also on the show. So that was my first fight at 125. And I remember just I've never cried during a weight cut except for that time. I didn't know if I was going to make it. I ended up making it, and everyone was like, "This is perfect. This is your weight." And I'm just like, oh my gosh, my eyes sunken in. They're cross-eyed. I'm watching Tasties on Instagram at weigh-ins. I'm just like, this is insane. But I definitely, I felt weak for my body, but I would definitely felt like the strongest girl in that cage. And I do at 125. I feel like the strongest 125er, but for me personally, I can feel my strength go down, my cardio go down at 125. But so that was my second fight with Pam Sorensen. Third one was with Shannon Dobson. And then my fourth fight was the King of the Cage title at 125. And so I won that, I think it was in the 4th round due to strikes. And that was the first time that's ever happened with me. And I was like, this is pretty cool. Okay, now I'm starting to grow as a fighter, grow as a martial artist. And after that, my coach was like, you should give out, the 125 a try. Actually, before this, let's back up a little bit. I went and tried out for 135, I think right after my first fight as a pro. And I got through, actually Sarge and I got through, and the people, whoever was on the panel, were like, we don't have enough 135 girls to be putting on the show right now, so we're going to go with the 115ers and the 185s or whatever the dudes were. So they're like, everybody come back next time. Thank you, 135 tryouts. And then I was like, okay, so that was my first time trying out. And then after I won the King of the Cage belt at 125, my coach was like, they're opening up the 125 division for tough. And I was like, this is nuts. That means I'm going to have to make it so many times. If I, best case scenario, I'm going to have to cut weights 6 times. So, but I was like, oh, well, let's do it. I'm not here to just say I tried and not actually try. So I worked my butt off. Stuck to a really, really, really strict diet and got on the show. I remember them asking, you tried out before, didn't you? And I was like, yes, I did. But by this time, I had the King of the Cage belt. I had fought Pam, and Pam was already Invicta. And then I fought Shanna, who was known for her hands too. And they're like, you beat Shauna and you had a split decision with Pam. You have the King of the Cage belt. They're like, all right. Like, I don't see why not. But this is a reality TV show. How is your personality? And I'm like, I don't know. It's all right, I guess. And I'm not like too excited or anything. But I'll fight for money. Let's do it.
Right.
And yeah. So being on the show, it was just, it was fun. It was kind of like little quarantine time. So I'm already used to it. We didn't get to listen to music. We didn't get to watch TV. We didn't get to call anybody.
Wow.
That first week we were in the hotel for a whole week without seeing anybody. We had to get escorted to the treadmills if we wanted to work out, just so that nothing was gonna like leak out and see who was in the house or anything. But it was nuts.
Like a bubble. So the quarantine, your adjustment to everything going on now is a little easier than most.
Yeah.
And it's funny, they've talked a lot about that, and me working at the fights last week and here in Jacksonville, and some of the fighters, no fans didn't bother them. Some of them have fought on the Ultimate Fighter or in smaller arenas with less fans, and to them it didn't really. And I tell people, I think once you turn that switch on and get in the cage and you hear the click, that's where you're in a different zone, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
There's some fighters say they don't even hear the fans; they're just such in a zone.
Mm-hmm.
Watching Gaethje and Ferguson go at it, I'll never relate to that, but let me tell you, those guys are focused. I've never seen a level of focus. By the way, Gaethje, a Denver, not Denver, but he's in Colorado. It's an Elevation fight team, and good people, very good people. Mm-hmm. Had the pleasure to work with them. So small world, it really is. Yeah. But as far as not going off the page here. Yeah, that focus is beyond something else, and it's interesting you brought that up. That you guys were such in a bubble, being on that show. It's very mental.
It is, and I grew up on the Reds, so we didn't have internet growing up. We were always like probably a season or two behind of what was in the now when it came to like fashion or phones. Even I remember a lot of my friends like in Gallup were already having their phones, and I just got my first one like sophomore year in high school, and it was one of those flip Nokia phones. And then it went to the flip Razor ones, the Motorola, and I was like, oh, we're moving up in the world. But it's
What would you say as far as early in your career and then getting to the Ultimate Fighter, and as you progressed through the show, what were some of the best moments and the most difficult?
Working up to the show or during the show?
During the show.
During the show, my best moments, I think when I fought Laura, my first fight, I was so focused, and I got to be able to see these girls without the camera in front of them. I got to see them up close and personal. I'd already beat Shauna, and she had a good name, and she was such a nice person. All these girls were super nice, but you watch the episodes and then you're like, ooh, that's what they're really saying. That's what they're really saying. But it wasn't really even like that. But the only time that I ever got like a kind of an ego, someone needed an ego check, was when Lauren was talking about how it was going to be her and Barb in the finals. And I was just like, wait a second. And it's just funny because you're watching this from hindsight. So I already knew that I had already beaten Lauren. But to see that again, I was just like, she thought she knew what was going to happen, what the outcome was going to be. And that's like one of the special things with MMA is like, according to anything, according to all the logic, all the fight logic, it should end up this way, but it doesn't most of the time. So it's always such a fun sport to be in and to live your life through. But the best part of the show was when I had beaten Lauren. I remember it was like, I don't know, it was the first round and I went for a kick and I just saw her feet come off the ground and I was like, this easy? All right, let's go. I guess we're doing this. So after that, I just felt not untouchable. Like I said, I already knew how MMA works. I already know how that world goes around. So I knew to just stay on what I was doing and stay focused. It worked for that first fight, so I didn't want to change the secret up or any of the process up for the next fight and the fight after that. I think the hardest part for me was to fight Montana. because we were on the same team. We'd see each other fight. We trained with each other. So we knew each other's weaknesses and strengths, and we had the same coaches, the same corners. It was hard for them. There wasn't necessarily tension because the coaches, Gaethje and Matt and Lucas, they were all on it. They understood that no personal, like, this wasn't anything personal. It was about who wins the fight and blah, blah, blah. But it was, I think they handled that professionally, and I think we did as well, but it was definitely hard. There was some tension here and there, but nothing that would consume us. And then after the fight, I remember going to her and crying and saying, "I'm sorry. You're a mom. I'm so sorry." She's like, "I would have done the same thing. We're fine." And, it was washed after that, but that was the hardest, just the mentality, like, that was the hardest mentality. I was just to, like, be okay, I'm going to fight my friend, and then see that gash in, like, first or second round, and then just be like, I'm going to keep going now. Is no one going to stop this? Like, I don't want to do this to her. But, yeah.
That had to be definitely tough. Definitely. Especially someone you know.
I feel like for the most part, the girls, from what I've gathered with the girls, it was hard for them to be in quarantine, basically, in the tough house, just because of, like, the mental aspect of keeping yourself isolated and, not being able to talk to your family, or not be able to be distracted, honestly. And I was okay with that. So that, like, the whole idea of being isolated to create drama or whatever for reality TV, I was okay with that growing up, how I grew up.
Interesting. And an easier adjustment for you, it sounds like, in that time. So as you get through the show, you get to the final, and talk about the experience of winning. You literally went from fighting in your second fight and evict the champion. You jump to the show. Now you're in the final of the show. You find yourself at this point. Talk to us about that. I mean, that's a big jump in a short period of time.
Yeah, a very
kind of
short
wild.
period of time. It was hard, that was when I really had to, because the fighting's easy. Any fighter will tell you that. Fighting's the fun part, the easy part. It's the making weight portion. So, and that has to be done throughout a span of 2 months if you do it right. If you don't want to bounce back after your fight to, and explode up to some other weight class. But so that was hard. After I made the show, there was no going back. So it was only forward. I couldn't be thinking that I had, if this happened, if that happened, blah, blah, blah. It was only like, this is going to happen. This is how it's going to happen. And staying goal oriented was kind of my push through. You see that shiny belt, and for sure everyone wants it. Everyone wants to be the first. Everyone wants to be the best. So that push helped me through that fight, because I had a broken foot too. So it was tough, but I didn't think that I wasn't capable of coming out on top. And then I knew on the show that, because Roxy and I sparred a couple of times, but I knew she was a lot stronger and a lot more technical than a lot of people would give her props for. So when we fought, so here's the thing. I was supposed to fight Sarge, right? And Sarge didn't make weight. Her and I were both in that freaking sauna till 3 a.m. on Thursday night, or on Wednesday night, trying to make weight. We were both just laying there talking. You can hear some of the staff from the UFC were there, and they were like, the next day, they're like, yeah, we didn't understand anything you girls were saying. You guys were on your own language, just like lying on the floor, dry heaving and talking to each other, trying to push each other through this so we can fight the next day.
Right.
But unfortunately, that's not how it happened. And, I knew how hard she was pushing because I was there right with her, and then as soon as they called it for both of us, luckily I was on weight, but unfortunately she wasn't, and she had to go get rushed to the hospital. Wow. So I stayed on weight that night, and then woke up in the morning, weighed in right on point. But at that point, it was a toss-up. I remember Lauren was there, and everyone's like, Lauren's just here because she's going to be on standby. And I'm like, they're not going to have me fight Lauren again. But also in the back of my mind, I was like, I had already fought her. I can beat her again. Maybe I can do something different this time. And then I was like, the only person that I can think of is Roxy, because she was number one, and she can be on the finale. And I was like thinking to myself, I remember thinking, what a Cinderella story. If I beat Roxy, then Barb, then Lauren, then Barb, then Roxy, 3, 2, 1. And sure enough, they're like, you're going to fight Roxy. And I was like, oh my gosh. And we're backstage, and her personality is so funny. She's like, I have an idea. Why don't we pretend that we're going to fight in front of Dana White when we go weigh in? And I was like, what? And so that's what that whole step up was, when Dana was standing in front of us after we weighed in, and then stood in front of each other for pictures. But that was actually a pretty hard fight too, because she was another one of my friends, and she was so nice. But I knew Roxy, and I knew she was going to bring it, so I couldn't hold back. After the first couple of punches, I was like, all right, okay, now we're going to fight Rox.
So you go on to win the Ultimate Fighter. You become the UFC Flyweight champion, the first one ever. That's congratulations coming from me and the team. I mean, that's amazing in itself. And you're welcome. And as we transition from that, your career, as it moves forward, you were scheduled to, you had a fight in UFC, I think it was 228. And what, from the Ultimate Fighter to that, talk to us about that period in your career, and kind of from there moving forward, and then we'll move on to some other parts of you outside the octagon.
228, was that the one that was supposed to be held in Rio Rancho?
Yes.
Okay.
220. So.
Yeah, that was so difficult for me to get through, because it was the last sparring day. I was sparring with a brand new person I'd never sparred with. I've seen him spar with other people though, so I knew he was safe. But you just get to that point where it's your last sparring day, you're cutting weight and you're tired and your body's just like giving out. And I kind of felt it. I was like, I don't think I should spar today. And everyone's like, it's the last sparring day. Come on, you got to push it. And so it's kind of hard in that time to be like, listen to my body and back off so I can make the fight, or make sure I'm ready for the fight by sparring today and doing what I think is going to be able to I can apply in the cage. So you're just like, okay, either one of these I can get away with like having the best outcome for the fight, or or the exact opposite, the total other end of the spectrum. And I was so excited to do it because I was in camp with Ray, who I consider to be one of my best friends. He's also one of my favorite fighters. We both moved from FIT to ACMA, and we've had the same training partners. We're both the same weight class, so we've been there with each other. He's pushed me a lot, and helped me see the other side of a lot of hard days, the silver lining to it. So I was like, yeah, Ray's gonna be here. I just got to know Nick Urso, our pad holder, our striking coach, and Groovy Lando was on the card with us. And so we were all just like team bonding and building each other up. It was great. It was so great. And Albuquerque, New Mexico, kind of being the hub for Native American culture, indigenous culture, and Netflix just moved in. So there was going to be a bunch of just like indigenous studios, and everybody was growing in that light too. And so I was super excited to finally fight in front of, my family again. It wasn't a Toyac or an Ignacio casino card from King of the Cage, but it was the UFC in Rio Rancho. And my whole family could go there, the whole Navajo Nation, everybody was ready to go, and I was ready to have fun and throw down. And then all of a sudden I felt that in my second round during that sparring day, I was like, oh, my knee. And I was like, I remember telling my coach, Derek Garcia, he was my wrestling coach. And I was like, my knee, freaking, like, I don't know what happened. Like I couldn't get up, and it was my right knee. So I couldn't go to my right side. I kept having to go to my open side because I couldn't plant. It would just hurt and sting, and I couldn't shoot because I couldn't bend my knees. And everybody was watching me, and they're like, what are you doing? Like, you need to start moving. And I'm like, it's my knee. And so like, I'm at the point now in that second, it was like mid-second round where I'm like talking to my coach and like getting pieced up, sparring, and they're like, focus. I'm like, my knee, dude. And so after that second round, I was like, I don't think I can do it. And then I you know, some other people again, they're like, let's go, come on, you have one more round. And again, that's when I should have just pulled off. But, you know, you have adrenaline going. You're like, this fight means the world to me. Like, I want to be able to show everybody that I, like, literally everyone that I know, everyone that I grew up with, everybody, that, like, I'm ready. I want to make sure that I'm ready inside so that I have no hesitation when I'm out there, you know, showing them how it's done. And then so I did that third round. I was like, dude, I don't know if I can do this. I went home. They're like, okay, cool off, go home, see how you feel the next day. And then I woke up the next day and I was like, it was so stiff, I couldn't bend it. And then I started freaking out and I texted my manager and everyone. And I was like, I think my knee's busted, guys. Like, I've never had it hurt like this before. And it was like so painful. I've had my foot broken. I've had bursitis. I've had tendonitis. I've had sprains. I've had, you know, like, I've had it all. But this was just on a whole different level of pain. And I went in to get my MRI, and sure enough, it was a level 2 grade sprain. And I went to the PI right away to see if they could help with any sort of PT. And they're like, I honestly wish you would have had a level 1 or a level 3, because level 3, grade 3 is like for sure surgery. And grade 1, like, we can rehab, but grade 2, they said it's so iffy. Like, you can rehab or you can surgery, but first things first, you want to do something that's less impactful. So I didn't go with surgery. They didn't think I needed it. But they were like, it was such a hard decision, and it was mine ultimately not to get the surgery, but I was still so sad that I couldn't show and perform to everyone that has supported me and loved me. And so I was like really, really heartbroken about that fight, not being able to make that card. But, you know, it kind of showed me who my true supporters were at the end of that. And I thought that this move here for the rest of my PT would be beneficial in showing that everybody that I'm still wanting to fight. I'm still wanting this as my career. You know, I changed up my whole life, moved from New Mexico to here about a month before the pandemic went down. Again, with that mindset of keeping this as my career and staying goal oriented and making sure that each step I take is to further me into becoming, you know, the champion again. Ultimately, that's my goal.
Awesome. It led to my next question as far as your short-term and long-term goals. And I see you putting the work in. We see you're out there running, and I see these great background shots, and I'm going, wow, you know, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So talk to us about what you like to do in your free time as we exit the octagon here and we transition to who Nicco is outside of the octagon. What do you like to do in your free time? And also talk to us about your heritage with the Navajo Nation.
Well, I love to be outdoors a lot. I like to hike. I like to mountain bike. I like to trail run. I like to play guitars. I like to just, you know, go off and take an adventure and make my own path. I think, you know, running around on the res in the creeks and on the sandstone kind of helped with that. A lot of people are kind of fearful about going into the woods alone or doing anything alone. And I'm just like, let's go, let's wake up. And I have my rock shoes. I just recently made a trip back to New Mexico and to Arizona, a little road trip to gather up a lot of things that I had left behind to bring back out here so I can jump on some recreation, outdoor recreation. But yeah, I think the res definitely helped with that. And it definitely helped with the mindset that I had on the show too, just being able to be okay at peace with the silence, without any noise, without talking to anyone, without having, you know, small talk on the phone here or there. And it's the same with what I like to do now. You know, I like to sit, play music. I like to wake up in the mountains. I like to just be in nature. It's just a humbling feeling, especially in a sport like MMA. You know, you can get demoralized pretty easily, whether it's from your opponent, your coaches some days, or even the fans. But waking up in nature, it's humbling, and it just makes you realize that nothing truly matters in that aspect when it comes to circumstances, you know, when it's actual life or death, and just appreciating every moment and making sure that you're living your life to the best, making sure you're happy so that you can help spread that and make everybody else happy. And that's kind of what I did since I was already back at home picking up all of my stuff. I helped with some packaging of like donations and stuff, because on the reservation, part of the reason why we have such a high number of coronavirus spreading is because we have one of the highest rates of people getting tested. But also we don't have necessities like running water. A lot of people have to go and haul it, but a lot of people who go and haul it right now don't have their jobs to put in the gas to go and haul it. So it's kind of just it's a tough situation for a lot of people, and this is the reality of the majority of the people on the Navajo Nation. So I think everybody is doing their part, but so I had to go and do my part. I would never ask anybody to do something that I haven't done. I would never assume that it's that easy. I would make sure to know what has to be done in order to do what I'm asking of someone. So I went and volunteered my day to help out with some water and packaging of toiletries and baby food and all that stuff, but making sure that I'm happy to give back to the people who actually support me too, through my dream, through this dream that I could not have been done without my supporters.
That's amazing. And one day, maybe me, Angela, and Gabriel will join you in the reservation to help out. I look forward to that. We trying to do some more community initiative work moving forward in Puerto Rico, but it's everywhere, and people need help everywhere. So I hope we can link up one day and do that. It would be amazing. So as we wrap up with some fast facts, a place you would like to visit that you've never been?
Puerto Rico.
Well, there you go. So you got to come. You got to come to the gym. So you haven't been to the gym?
No.
Obviously, not. Wow. Yeah, because Angela said that you were planning on coming. So my plan is to be back there in September. I was going to come actually July or August myself. I'm in Florida. So yeah, you have to visit. What an amazing community the gym is out of. In La Perla, it's beautiful and truly unique to the island. So that's amazing. What is your favorite food?
In or out of camp? No, I'm just kidding. Favorite food, pizza.
You
can put any sort of topping on that. You can make the crust thin or thick. Yeah, you can just go crazy. It's like a scramble on bread.
There you go. Do you have a celebrity crush, and/or this two-part question? Who's your favorite fighter, whether it's boxing, MMA, and who's your celebrity crush?
Ooh, I honestly have been getting into some Clarissa Shields lately, just because she's so heavy with her punches. And a lot of people don't think she's quick on her feet, but when it comes to boxing, you kind of find your style. Her hands are quick, and she's planted. Her punches are hard. They're impactful. She has some really good movement. So right now, that's who it is. And then celebrity crush.
Tough one.
Jason Momoa. It's gotta be.
Okay, it's interesting.
Yeah.
What's something most people don't know about you?
I was a yoga instructor before a fighter. Maybe people know that. But
so as we wrap up today, Nicco, thank you for joining us. It's been truly a pleasure to hear your story in the octagon, outside of the octagon. What would you like to say to those young and upcoming fighters, other youth that have an interest in combat sports, whether it's boxing or MMA, jiu-jitsu, judo, etc.?
Stay disciplined to your sport. Make sure you find balance with your life and the sport. Make sure that you understand that there's a separation between taking care of your body and taking care of your mind and your spirit, and just pushing too hard, going reckless with it. So definitely finding that balance and staying disciplined, but also keeping your goals in mind. Make daily goals so that everything's achievable and you're progressing each day, even if it's by 1%.
That's awesome. Great message to those that have an interest in the sport and want to grow, and whether it's boxing or MMA. And as we wrap up today, what would you like to say to those people during these tough times?
Stay tough. You know, everything's temporary. So we're going to come out of this eventually. You can either come out of it on top or defeated. So keep in mind that you're one strong individual and you put your mind to something. There's a lot of things that you think can't happen and you can totally make happen.
That's awesome. We thank you so much for your time, Nicco. And we want everybody to know that you'll be in the octagon sooner than later. You are in the UFC. You are a champion in everybody's eyes. So keep pushing forward. And from Team La Perla, we send blessings to you and everyone. And thank you so much for your time today.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care. Thank you.